Hey everyone, welcome back to Apollo Art Analysis. This episode to be studying a piece by the established multidisciplinary artist known as Tonan Ahn. And in this episode, we're going to be looking at the Brutalist aesthetic, and we're also going to look at what it might mean to live in a big city. So let's jump right into it. So whenever you first see this work, with these two lone, either concrete or metal blocks set in center right certainly catches the eye. Our first impression may be rather curious, so wonder what exactly we're looking at here. You'll notice, of course, in the impact of color, not a lot of vibrancy within the composition here. We have really a grayscale scene, and a grayscale scene is always going to really intensify the visual impact of both form and texture, so we certainly see that here. In the realm of texture, you see a diverse range. We see the static grass, to the delicate wisping energy, all the way to the rough and rigid concrete or metal blocks here. All in all, this does introduce a bit of visual energy while also feeling incredibly realistic. So it immerses us within the scene at hand quite well. What you'll notice here, of course, is also the impact of visual energy, like we said. We see this everywhere from texture. We see this also in the impact of intensified light as well. It gives us a sense of visual energy, kind of energizes the composition and, brings us within that quite well. Another thing you may notice is the contrast within the work at hand. The contrast, say, between this delicate, almost kind of spiritual energy, if you will, and the very rough and rigid concrete blocks there. The contrast here is quite stunning, and we feel as if a spirit is kind of being crushed between these two halves. It's hard to say for sure. What you may also notice, of course, is the impact of brutalism. If you know what that is, it is a style of architectural design that really has kind of raw concrete. I have two pieces I want to reference real quick. I'm going to bring those in, see what we can learn about the brutalist aesthetic. All right, so I brought two pieces in here. We have one here. We have one here, both of which show the impact of brutalism in real life. For example, in the outside space, I believe this in Europe, you see just how raw it is. It really is raw minimalist form, not very much color, and very drained concrete at that. We look at this piece, we see the inside brutalist aesthetic. We also see that as well, very raw concrete form, very bare bones aesthetic as well. So we certainly see that, and it is very common in, say, urban settings. So that really relates to the work at hand, of course, trying to capture the brutalist aesthetic, kind of crushing a spirit between both of those there. Brutalism is really taking minimalism to its most extreme. That's always important to remember. So as he was creating this work, the original artist was talking about a kind of tumultuous time living in the big city. And what we mean by that is when you live in the big city, it really is a biome of its own. It has the power to change everything from the weather to a citizen's mental health. We look at big cities, we have just these endless kind of skyscrapers. I'm thinking something like New York City, a really big city that's hard to escape. I believe the artist was living in Toronto at the time, but, regardless of that, you do have those very tall buildings that they feel like nothing but concrete. They have a very prismatic or kind of predictable, almost mass-produced style to it. So it's quite interesting. So the original artist was living in Toronto in that big city, and he was feeling light. And what he means by this is he felt light despite being against all these concrete forms, almost as if he was being crushed between those buildings there. So we kind of see that. We see the spirit in between two relentless blocks of that brutalist aesthetic there. It is very cold, it is lonely, and it is desolate as well. And so with this in mind, of course, the artist was talking about feeling lonely and feeling, a bit of a negative energy, if you will. And it's quite interesting. This is very common in urban settings. It's almost as if nature is a necessity. You have to get out, kind of vacation to any nature spot that you can. That's why something like Central Park in New York City is just so important, because when you live in the city for so long amidst nothing but cold concrete, it can feel quite lonely. Especially during the winter. I believe that was specifically what this artist was talking about. During the winter, that cold concrete can just feel relentless and even hopeless at times as well. But despite this, we have, of course, the classic metaphor of a diamond being made under extreme pressure. So we kind of see an example of that. You see this brilliant energy, if you will, that just comes out of that. Even though it is being crushed, it still has that brilliant spirit and that vibrant light that just kind of pours and melts or flows out of that. So absolutely stunning, and we absolutely love to see this work here. Ton of visual energy, a ton of impact of form, of course, an amazing aesthetic of the brutalist style of architectural design. There's just so many things within the work that you could really talk about. And so, like I said, when you're in these tougher times, it's going to mold you. It's going to kind of push you and test you to your limits. But as a result of that, you're likely going to be coming out way stronger than you did before. So, with this in mind, find your next rebirth, find your next, movement, and find your next kind of period of growth. It's incredibly important, especially when you feel like you're in those darker times. So the piece before us is actually a digital rendering. This was made in the Blender program. So of course, a very popular program as well. If you want to get into 3D art, I'd say Blender is probably one of the best ones to really begin with. Kind of work your way up to something like Cinema 4D, but all of those are going to give you a very good opportunity to show the absolute realism of the digital render. We look at something like this, but like I said, it feels incredibly realistic when you're talking about texture. So it immerses us within the composition masterfully. We absolutely love to see something like that. So if you like this work today, go check out the original artist Tonan Ahn, doing some amazing stuff, really working within, say, the spiritual, the metaphorical, of course, the symbolic as well. So many different things that this artist works with, and I'm proud to have first studied this artist, I believe, back in November of 2021, if I'm correct. But yeah, absolutely love to see the artist's growth, love to see the artist's style, and we always love to study a piece such as this. Really hope y'all enjoyed today. We talked about everything from the brutalist aesthetic to the kind of absence of color to, say, the kind of hopelessness that we may feel in the big city, but also the potential for a higher rebirth or a higher sense of growth as well. So really hope y'all enjoyed today. And like I said, if y'all did, go check out the original artist Tonan Ahn, always doing some amazing stuff in the world of mostly digital rendering, but also some other stuff as well, such as animation. My name is Apollo. This is Apollo Art Analysis, and I'll see y'all on the next episode. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you'd like to support our work directly, please check out our Apollo community tokens. Apollo Art Exchange is an ecosystem of art appreciation which elevates artists each and every day. Thanks for listening.